Yes, sir.
Well, I was going to suggest that a lot of these problems go away if we abandon the presumption that Luke 21 is equivalent to the Olivet Discourse. Matthew 24 and Mark 13 were given at night in confidence to 4 specific disciples.
You're saying, I want to be sure I understood that.
Yeah,
You're saying Mark and Matthew is given to only 4 disciples?
Yes. Peter, James, and John and Andrew are specifically detailed as the ones that he was dealing with in Matthew 24 and Mark 13.
Okay, I'll take a
now,
look
Luke
at that.
21 was given in the temple, not on the Mount of Olives, during the day.
Okay.
So there are 2 different presentations. Now, both presentations include a cluster of signs which Matthew calls the beginning of sorrows. But the key verse is verse 12 of Luke 21. Even though Jesus uses those expressions, he says before these, and then goes on to describe that they're going to be surrounded by armies and get out of town if they can. We need to understand that Titus and Vespasian were commissioned by Nero to get control of northern Galilee, and then Nero dies. For about 9 months they're quibbling as to who's going to take over till Vespasian finally decides to play his cards, and he goes to Rome and takes it over. And when he does, he tells Titus to finish the job. During that time, the armies are around Jerusalem, but they haven't sealed it off yet because Nero died and they had that upheaval. It's during that interval that Jesus has instructed his followers to get out of town and don't let your friends come back because it cost their lives. Now, that means that the Luke 21 account is focusing on the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem. In the Matthew account, you get to verse 15 and the abomination of desolation, and what he talks about is all after that. Mm-hmm. So there's 2 different destructions of Jerusalem in view, the one in AD 70 in Luke, and a final one, of course, eschatologically, if you will, in Matthew. Yeah. I think we all stumble because we've all presumed that all 3 passages are the same presentation. One of those is a different group at a different time with a different focus. And if you do that and you diagram it, it all flows.
Yeah. Well, that's something to think about. I'll have to check those specifics out to see what I think on that. But you did say one thing that got my interest. I mean, not to say that others didn't, but one thing in particular. Be careful over there. One thing in particular, and that is you were saying that hiatus between the time of Nero's death and Vespasian being emperor, that maybe the soldiers would have maybe lessened up their guard a little bit around Jerusalem. They were surrounding it, but maybe would not have. Yeah, but what I'm trying to deal with specifically is if they're surrounded by the Roman army.
They'd position themselves, but they didn't finish because Nero died, and all bets are off until that gets resolved.
So you're saying they slipped out during that time?
Sure. When the emperor dies, his decrees become null and void. And there was I think it was about 9 months where these 3 other guys they finally murdered each other off. Vespasian goes and takes over the empire. When he does, he tells his son to go ahead and finish the job with Jerusalem.
So that would answer part of that question, if that might be a possible explanation.
I've read that somewhere that the Roman army went back to Caesarea just a hiatus there, the siege basically lifted.
Okay, so if that's true, and that's something we have to investigate, but if it's true that either that the lines lessened or the army probably or possibly moved back for a short time, that would give an opportunity to leave after they were surrounded. So maybe that would be it.
Luke 19, is specifically talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. And so Luke 21, 20 through 24 is as well. So Luke is clearly focused more on the AD 70 event than the others are.
And I think that's reasonable. That's sort of where I came out, but there were some still questions in my mind. Yes.
Changing the subject, I missed the connection between Paul and his Colossians comment about the gospel being preached. It seemed like if Paul said that in 60 and they're saying it was fulfilled in 70, it's like Paul's saying I got 10 more years to get it done.
Well, what I was making on the point of Paul is they were saying that the gospel will preach in all the kingdom and then the end will come, and that if the preaching to the nations had actually all occurred, let's say before AD 70, then at that point, let's say, well, we got 80, 70 now. Now judgment can come on the Jews. But I'm saying Paul, he made his statement about preaching. It's already been done, so that actually all the preaching had been finished by 80, 60. That left a 10-year time period in which there was apparently there was no need to preach the gospel to the nations anymore.
What passage is that in Colossians?
I wrote it down here. Anybody know right off the top of your head?
1 or 3.
I think it's in 3.
They would say that's Christ saying that to the disciples, that the gospel we've preached. So he's saying that in 33 or 30, whenever that was.
Yeah, but the imminency question, even in reference to the destruction of Jerusalem, I think is significant, because if that happens actually before 60, then you're saying more than 10 years. When he says, when that happens, then the end will come, he says, man, he sure waited around a while, another 10 years, and it already accomplished the purposes. And, that it just doesn't seem to carry on this same kind of imminency idea that I see in the text.
There's an epistolary statement that the gospel has been preached throughout the earth, or every place under the sky, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember reading a bunch of commentaries on that one time, and thought that a lot of people thought that relates to the introduction of the gospel.
Yeah, but that's not what they're saying, I don't think. But
Well, that's not what they're saying.
the big issue to me in that whole discussion is not the Paul statement, but that in Matthew 24, if all the nations there refers to essentially what is in the rim of the Mediterranean, then how are we to take Matthew 28 about preaching or teaching to all the nations? We don't have any responsibilities anymore. It's all been done a long time ago.
And they just blow that off or dismiss it, because then they turn around as postmillennialists and make the Great Commission their big marching orders for now, where they restate the cultural mandate in the Great Commission.
Yeah. Somebody else? Right here.
Dr. House, thank you for all of your work. In your reading and study of the writings of Josephus, have you come across anything about a 7-year covenant, or tracking all buying and selling, or a mark of the beast, or a 10
Yeah, Josephus deals, as even some others do, with trying to explain what's going on in the 70 weeks and so forth. There's some of that there. But I pretty well passed by that, because that wasn't germane to what I was going to try to do. But yeah, there is some discussion there. But I really wouldn't want to try to speak to what it is, because I didn't take the time to study it. But he's aware of Daniel. He's aware of the events. I mean, I don't see that just in my initial reading and just what I remember, I don't see him taking some of the arguments that you see in, for example, some of the early fathers who see an interlopal period, or what we think of as a break, that I think is true. That idea of there being a break between the 69th and 70th weeks, which to me is pivotal in our discussion, I don't think it sort of hit their heads very much. They didn't figure that out. That would require a 7-year covenant and those things, yeah. But I don't see any of that discussion in their views, yeah.
You mentioned on that these were not on the CD. It'd be on a website or on the internet.
The remainder of the paper, I think about the first 6 or 7 pages is
Where on the internet would that be?
The internet will be on pretrib.org. The whole talk will be on that, yeah.
This maybe a little bit lighter in subject over here.
Hi.
Just so you know, Canadians have stomped out preterism because we believe that Obama's Nation of Desolation begins on January 20th.
All right. That's Canadians.
I'm
All
sorry,
right.
I won't talk anymore.
All right. Appreciate that Canadian humor. All right.